Thank you. We will get started. My name is Amy O'Leary, and I work at Strategies for Children, and I'm gonna have my colleagues introduce themselves. So Titus and then Marissa.
Hello, hola. My name's Titus Das Remedios. I am Director of Research and Policy at Strategies for Children.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Fear, and I am the Project Manager at Strategies for Children.
So as you read in chat, we are offering this tonight in English and Spanish, and I'm going to turn it over to Reed, who will tell us more about the interpretation.
Thanks, Amy. And I am with the team at Excel Linguistics for Spanish and English interpretation this evening. In just a few seconds, you will all see a globe icon right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's very important that whether you speak English or Spanish, when you see that globe, click on it and choose your preferred language. If you've joined from a cell phone or a tablet, there's a 3 dots button right next to the word more, where you can choose either English or Spanish. And again, we strongly ask that everyone tonight find that button and choose your language.
Muy buenas noches para todos. Good evening, everyone. Tenemos servicios de interpretación esta noche en inglés y en español. Para accesar el icono de la interpretación, busque el globo que aparece en la parte derecha inferior de su pantalla y seleccione español. Si se está conectando de una tableta, celular o iPad, busque los 3 puntos que aparecen en la parte superior de su pantalla donde dice More y seleccione Interpretación, que dice Language Interpretation en inglés. Seleccione español como su idioma. De cualquier manera, cualquiera que sea su idioma de preferencia, bien sea inglés o español, es importante que seleccione el icono del globo como su idioma de preferencia. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. We're so excited. We're so excited to have Excel Linguistics with us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over soon to my colleague, Marissa, and we are going to stop the chat because we want folks to use Q&A to ask questions. So if you have questions during the session, just use the Q&A that is, you can see at the bottom of the screen.
Thank you, Amy. So today we are going to be talking a little bit about the EEC ARPA Child Care Stabilization Grant, and that was newly released in Massachusetts. Before we start, I want to share a little bit about who we are at Strategies for Children. So Strategies for Children works to ensure that Massachusetts invests the resources needed for all children from birth to age 5 to access high quality early education and care programs that prepare them for success in school and life. So we are not a part of state government. We consider ourselves friends of the state. We are partnering with them to help provide all of you with technical assistance and application support with this grant application. So let's start with what is the American Rescue Plan Child Care Stabilization Grant. So the EEC Child Care Stabilization Grant in Massachusetts is funded by the American Rescue Plan, which was signed by President Biden on March 11th of 2021. In this legislation, Massachusetts received $314 million in federal relief money to provide economic relief to childcare programs impacted by COVID-19 across the country. The Department of Early Education and Care developed the Commonwealth Cares for Children C3 formula as a way to distribute these federal relief funds to providers, because prior to this, we have never had a mechanism in our state to get money out to all licensed childcare providers in Massachusetts. So this is the first time for everyone. It's important to know that this is a grant and not a loan, which means that you do not have to pay it back. This grant may impact your taxes or any health and social service benefits. And we know that providers have a lot of questions about some of those implications. And so we as advocates are working to connect you with the appropriate resources and networks and connections that can answer some of those very specific to you and to your program questions, because we wouldn't want to give you information that's inaccurate. So we're working to connect you all with some of those resources so that you can get those answers in the coming weeks. These grants are not competitive. All childcare providers that apply and meet the eligibility criteria will receive funds, and applications will be accepted on a rolling basis. So today it's August 11th. The application opened in July, and that was the first month of eligibility. So if you were to apply, you would apply for the first month that you become eligible, and then you would be able to receive up to 6 monthly payments after that. So the Child Care Stabilization Grant will run for 6 months from July through December of 2021, and providers can receive up to 6 monthly payments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the eligibility slide. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the C3 formula and how that determines your grant amount. So the C3 formula considers each provider's license capacity, their workforce. So if you're a group and school age program, the number of educators that work in your program, the staff levels, and if you are a family child care program, if you have an assistant, either part-time or full-time, that works in your program. It also takes into account the vulnerability of the community that you serve. So all eligible providers, regardless, will receive a base amount based on license capacity and workforce. Some providers will also receive an additional equity adjustment, which is reflected in the application, and that is based on the vulnerability of the community that you serve. The equity adjustment is calculated using the Social Vulnerability Index or your subsidy enrollment. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Social Vulnerability Index and your subsidy enrollment later on and how that works in the application. But I want to acknowledge that the Social Vulnerability Index is acknowledging that both subsidized and private pay programs serve vulnerable children and communities, that just using the subsidy system wouldn't be an accurate marker of that. And so the department is using subsidy enrollment as well as the Social Vulnerability Index to include both subsidized and private pay programs in that equity adjustment. So regardless of either of those, if you qualify for SVI or for the subsidy enrollment, you would be eligible for an equity adjustment. And to learn more about the C3 formula, I've included the link at the bottom here to the EEC Strategic Action Plan portal. And we'll be sending out the slides with all of these links after the call so that you have this presentation and you can click on the links then. But that's a great area to go into the presentation. You can watch, they have it in English and in Spanish, and you can see the formula development team go through specific examples of how this formula would work in different program types. So if you're in a large center or a small center, a family child care program with an assistant, a family child care program without an assistant, it shows you how the formula might work for each of these programs. All right, so we are going to launch a poll in a minute here just to get a sense of where everyone is coming from, how familiar you are with this information before we move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who will be launching that poll. And while we do that, we'll take a look at the question and answer and sort of see what's coming in.
Thanks, Marissa. So I'm about to launch the poll. There are 4 questions, and in English and in Spanish. So please review the questions and then select your answer. And we will use this information as we continue on tonight. So it's really helpful to know if folks have had a chance to review any of the materials yet, or if you've started the application. That's great. We can see some answers coming in. Thanks to everyone who's completed the poll. We're almost to halfway. So if you haven't had a chance, just review the questions, and then at the end, you need to hit submit. Okay, we'll do it, what, about 1 more minute? It's great to see all of this information. Okay, we'll give it 30 more seconds. Great, I'm gonna end the poll and then I'll share the results. So you can see, it looks like most people have reviewed the materials and started the application, and that almost everyone's willing to share your expenses, which is great to see. And then you can see how the grant money will get spent. So rent, mortgage, payments, utilities is the top one, followed by equipment, and then personnel. So that's interesting. Some similar to one we did earlier today and some a little bit different. So thank you for that. I will turn it back to Marissa.
Thanks, Amy. So that's great to see that so many people have reviewed the application or started the application already. So we'll just talk a little bit, sort of framing this conversation, and then we can get into the application specifically and then the Q&A section after that. So to start, this is an unprecedented influx of federal funds for the early education and care field. And it operates in addition to current state funding and does not replace either the private pay daily rates or the existing subsidy system. We know that programs suffered heavy financial losses during the childcare closure and throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's likely that the funding included in the Child Care Stabilization Grant will not be enough to cover all of those losses. However, we'll talk a little bit later about some important feedback that you all can share with EEC, with our state elected officials and with our federal elected officials that can help continue to advocate for more funding for the early education and care field. All right, next slide. Like I said, your feedback will be essential moving forward, and there are many state and federal plans advocating for more public funding for the early education and care system. And this is an opportunity to build back a stronger system. So we know that the current financing model for childcare is broken, that the subsidy reimbursement rate is too low and doesn't cover the true cost of care, that parent fees and tuition payments in Massachusetts are unaffordable and some of the highest in the country. Too few children have access to high quality early childhood settings, and too many educators live on close to poverty level wages. Then finally, too many programs are only one payment away from closing or having to lose their homes, that there isn't a stable funding mechanism for the early education and care field. We also know that the field is a complex system with many funding streams, public and private dollars, but that we cannot continue to pay programs on a per child, per day basis, and that programs need stable, flexible additional funds. And this C3 formula and this grant is an opportunity to evaluate the impact on a licensed capacity-based financing model. So the C3 formula doesn't take into account your daily enrollment or your monthly enrollment. It takes into account your licensed capacity. So knowing that at any given month, your enrollment may fluctuate, the department made the decision to fund this based on license capacity instead. So this is an opportunity to share with the department and with our elected officials that having that sort of stable funding model rather than a model based on your fluctuating enrollment was beneficial to programs, that provided the necessary stability throughout the 6-month grant period. We'll talk a little bit later about some more opportunities for feedback, but that's just one example. And also important to acknowledge that this is a new way of distributing public funding to all programs in Massachusetts, that we haven't had a funding mechanism like this prior to this month. So this is a new experience for everyone, and we know how important your all feedback and your questions will be, and so we want to share that with the department to inform future decisions, to inform future grant opportunities, and to make sure that your feedback is heard. So now we'll talk a little bit about eligibility. So all providers in Massachusetts that were licensed or approved as of March 11th of 2021 and that are open at the time of application are eligible. Programs will not be penalized for a temporary COVID-19 related emergency closure that occurs during the grant period. So to give some examples here, as long as you were licensed, so for all of these examples, we're going to assume that they were licensed prior to March 11th. If you were open and serving children in July, you would apply for July as your first month and you would be eligible for 6 months of funding. If you are a school year only program, so you're closed during the summer and you operate for the school year, so you open in September, you would apply starting September 1st, and that would be your first month of the grant, and you would apply for the remaining 4 months. So September through December would be the months that you are eligible for this grant. So we know that the programs that will decide to remain closed for the duration of the grant will not be eligible for this bucket of funding, and that they will need additional support to reopen in the future. We also know that some programs may not receive the full grant amount, or that new EEC licensed programs will need support as they come into this field. And we as advocates want to make sure that we can tell those stories and we can show how we can help sort of those specific groups of providers, and how, in what ways this grant was helpful and in what ways this grant wasn't helpful for those groups of providers moving forward. All right, so I'm going to share a little bit about some of the application resources that EEC has developed. So to start off, there is a help desk support that is built into the application itself. So if you have specific questions about the application, if you need help logging into your account, if you need to file an appeal and you want to correct information that was pre-populated from LEAD, you should direct as many of those questions as you can to the help desk support, because they will be able to answer, but they'll also be able to change your application for you and make some of those adjustments. We're happy to answer as many questions as we can, but they're really the ones that will be able to support you in the application. And keep in mind that this is a brand new, it's a brand new grant, it's a brand new application vendor, and that they have a lot of support for providers, but it may take a little while for them to sort of catch up to the initial influx of people applying for this grant, and then it should slow down after that. So towards the beginning, there may be a lot of questions and a lot of support needed. And as we continue down this application process, it should slow down. I've heard some people who are still sort of waiting for contact information or waiting to hear a response. So keep that in mind moving forward. I've also included the link to EEC's Child Care Stabilization Grant website. So on this website, they explain what the grant is. They explain specific language about eligibility. They go through what you'll need to complete the application, and they have a list of resources at the bottom of the page. So in that resources, right now, all the resources are included in English. They will all be available in Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin moving forward. They're just waiting to finish the translations. The help desk support and the application itself are already available in multiple languages. So you can click on the application and you can change to the language of your preference. In the application, it asks you how you would like to receive future communications about the grant, and you can indicate there what your preferred language is. And then with the help desk support, that resource is also available in multiple languages. So Still waiting for some of these other ones that I'm about to discuss to be translated, but those 3 resources are already included in other languages. So in the resource section on EEC's website, they have included a user guide for programs, which shows you how to log into the application, where to find the application, how to fill out specific parts of it. It takes you through the entire application and shows you how to use the website itself, what information EEC is asking for. It has some pretty descriptive little bubbles that pop up and show you what information you should include for each section. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the user guide. And then EEC has also created a video walkthrough resource library that is included on their YouTube channel. It has a 30-minute how to submit an application video, which walks you through the entire process. And it also has shorter clips that show you how to do one specific segment. So for example, if your licensed capacity information in the application is incorrect and you want to file an appeal to correct that information, you can go to the video library and you can watch the video specifically on the appeals process, and it'll show you how to file an appeal and how to correct that information in your application. The department has also created 2 PDF documents of the application itself. So if you're a group and school age provider or a family child care provider, there's small slight differences in the application, so you want to make sure you click on the correct one. They've included 2 PDF documents that walk you through what the entire application looks like, just so you can know what questions to expect, what information you'll need to gather beforehand, and then you can prepare yourself before you go into the application itself. The department has also created a C3 formula calculator. So this is where you can estimate your grant amount. Your final award amount may likely be made different based on your official application. So your final grant amount will be determined by your application, but this is a good way to see what you can expect from this grant or what you should be receiving. All right, so to prepare for your application, you will need your program ID, the race, ethnicity, and gender of either the center director or the family child care operator. And this is a federal requirement. And then EEC is asking all providers to confirm or change the EEC consumer webpage rate and hours information. So there's a section there where the department has uploaded information from its child care search tool about your program's rate and hours, and they want providers to go in and they want them to either correct and change those rate and hours or to certify that they are correct and move forward in the application if they are right. The department is also asking for enrollment information as of the 1st of the current month. So if you apply for July as the first month of this grant, you would include your enrollment information as of the 1st of July. And this enrollment information will not impact your grant amount in any way. The grant amount is determined by licensed capacity. This is just important information for the department to collect on enrollment in programs. The department will also be collecting staff information. So if you are a family child care provider, information about a family child care assistant that may work in your program with you, including their salary, any benefits that you may offer, or if you were able to offer them an additional stipend this year. And then if you are a group and school age program, they're asking for staff information for all the educators and employees that work in your program. The department's also asking for scholarship information. So if your program is able to offer financial assistance of any kind to the families that attend your program, and this is outside of the state subsidy system. So if you offer scholarships or financial assistance to families outside of that system. There is one optional question on this application, which we included in the sort of first poll, which is asking programs to share if they'd be willing to share their monthly expenses with the department. So this is an optional question. However, we are encouraging providers to fill this information out if possible, because this is very important information in terms of advocating for future funds as well. So For example, when we talked about earlier about what kind of feedback might be helpful for state elected officials and federal elected officials to hear, this is one example of that you could share. You know, I received X amount in this child care stabilization grant, but my monthly expenses are really this high. Or you could share, I received X amount in the child care stabilization grant, but I lost this amount throughout the COVID-19 closure, and this is sort of how much I've lost over the past year. Those are two really important, really valuable data points that are really effective in advocating for this field and for you all. So I'd encourage everyone to share that information with the department if possible. And then the final two sections are attestations and banking and tax information. So for the attestation section, it starts from the top by explaining what these funds can be used for, and we'll go into that in a few minutes. And then there's three sort of attestations at the bottom. The first is to follow COVID-19 regulations and policies in your local context, to maintain salaries for the staff while you are during the grant period, and then finally to provide tuition relief to families to the extent possible. And to the extent possible is sort of the key term there. And we've received some questions on that specific language and with the attestations, and our advice to programs is that if you have questions specific to your program and specific to what makes you feel comfortable in terms of signing legal documents and the required reporting that comes with signing attestations, that we're happy to connect you to any legal resources. Feel free to reach out to us. But that really is sort of a personal legal question that you should consult someone who can answer specific to your context and to your program. And then finally, banking and tax information, knowing that some programs have never really interacted with EEC financially before, and so they need to have a way to pay you. So it shows you, or it gives you the choice of either selecting to be paid by mail or to be paid by electronic transfer, and you can enter that information there, as well as your W-9 information for payment.
So Marissa, let's take a break and we can just review. And I think you'll get to this question, that when you formulate the workforce in the program, do you count the educators or all staff?
It's a great question. So you do not count all staff members. So you count staff members that are working directly with children. And when we get to the Q&A section, I'll actually pull up part of the application and I can show you where to find that specific information, because there's a quick little button that you can kind of hover over and a description in the staffing section that shows you some more information about what staff members to count.
And then we're a center-based license exempt program. Can we apply for this grant? I actually texted EEC while we were on the call and got this answer, that if you're a private school funded, yes. If you're a public school, no. And then if you need more information for that, just to connect with the help desk. And then if family child care programs plan to close permanently in October, can they apply for July and September? And I said, from what we understand, you can apply for the months that you are eligible.
That's correct. So if you're going to be closed for the month of October, you would not apply for that month, but you could apply for the first 2 months of the grant.
And then I know you'll get to this one. Well, I'll do the one that I answered. Do we need to use the money monthly, or can we save it for a larger purpose? And the payments will come monthly, but you have flexibility when you can use the funds. And then Marissa, if you can include this one when you do the Q&A, the programs I'm applying for have different enrollment numbers in the summer and then during the school year. Do I only use the enrollment number for each month or a total at full capacity?
Great question. So I'll start with that one actually, because I think that's helpful to point out. So the way this application will work is that it's a 6-month application. It starts in July and ends in December, and you apply for the first month that you are eligible first. So if you were open and serving children in July, you would start by applying for July. After that first application, you'll have the opportunity to confirm or recertify that the information hasn't changed, or to make edits and to update your information from each subsequent month after that. So for example, your enrollment information will most likely change from month to month. If you were to bring on a new assistant as an FCC program, or additional educators as a group and school age program, you'd be able to update that information in the grant as well. or if your license capacity were to change. Those are all factors that could influence, sorry, not the enrollment, the license capacity and your staffing levels are two factors that could influence your grant amount. So it's actually to your benefit to be able to update that each month, and then that will be reflected in your grant amount. So yes, you'll be able to go in each month and update your enrollment information as of the first of the month. So in October, you'll go in and you'll update your enrollment information as of the 1st of October. And the grant will also open on the 1st of each month. So right now, programs who were eligible for July would start with July as their first month in the application. And then as soon as they were approved, August automatically became open to them because we are now in August. So some programs have applied for both July and for August and been awarded those funds. And then September 1st is when the September application will open. So it's also important, I see another question here in the Q&A that someone's asking if they should have applied for August already. And what's great about this is that you don't have to, there's not a strict deadline from month to month. So if you were to, let's say you want to consult some additional legal advice, or you need some more support on some of these tax questions, or you want to just be prepared for the application. If you were to wait until September, and then September 1st, you went into the application and looked, as long as you were eligible for July and August, you'll be able to go back and apply for those funds in July and August. So you'd want to apply, even if you're entering the application in September, you'd want to apply for the first month you were eligible. So you'd go back and you would have applied for July. All right, I'm going to take a little, I see one more question that I'll answer now. So for an FCC educator who's affiliated with a system, how will you be paid? So will the funding go through the systems, or will EEC pay the educators directly without system involvement? And EEC will be paying all programs and then FCC operators directly without system involvement. So the final section in the application, which I'll share in a minute, is your banking information. And so you enter that, and then the funds will be dispersed to you through that, not through the systems. All right. So.
And Amy, did you see that question from Christine in the chat?
I did.
Okay, thanks.
Great. So we've also included the link to apply to the grant in this presentation. And again, we'll send this presentation out after we're finished tonight. But the first thing you'll need is your lead username and password. The grant is built into the lead application or the lead account. And there's a tab called Grants Management. So when you log into your lead account, you'll see a Grants Management button, and you click on that, and that brings you to the grant. The application opened on August 3rd of 2021, and the grant will be available from July through December of 2021. So you should, again, apply for the first month that you meet the eligibility criteria to begin the application. Monthly funding amounts will be calculated based on the information submitted in your application. So you'll have an opportunity, like we said, to confirm or update your application information each month. And then again, the application is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin. So now a little bit into the preview of the application. So these are the 10 sections over these next 2 slides. The first section is instructions. So gives you instructions for how to complete the application and what information you'll need. The second section is called program information. And then it goes into operation hours. So in operation hours, that's where you will update your EEC consumer webpage information, so your rate and the hours for your program, and then you certify that that's correct and move on to the next section. And then it has capacity information. So this is where you would enter your enrollment as of the first of the month. And this, again, does not impact your grant amount in any way. It's just important information to collect. And then to highlight this, within that capacity information section is where that question about if you would be willing to give EEC additional information about your monthly expenses included. So I wanted to just pull that out and show people where that question is included and encourage everyone to fill out that information. As you can see on the bottom there, they say that this information will be used to inform EEC federal reporting and future grant opportunities. Then the next section is staff information. So that's where you will include information about the staff that work in your program or any FCC assistants that you have working with you. The next few sections is the equity adjustment. So we spoke a little bit earlier about the equity adjustment and how that is calculated by either the social vulnerability index or your subsidy enrollment. And EEC is doing both of these calculations twice. So for example, if you could qualify for an equity adjustment based on your subsidy enrollment, they're taking your subsidy enrollment at 2 points in time. So one prior to the pandemic and then one more recently, comparing the two percentages, and whichever one is higher is the percentage that EEC is using to calculate your adjustment. If you are qualifying for the equity adjustment based on your program's location and the social vulnerability index, again, the department is calculating that twice. They're using either your zip code or census tract level. And then whichever of those two is higher is what EEC is using to determine your equity amount. So on that tab, it just shows you how EEC has calculated this, what each of your 4 sort of options are. And then at the bottom, it shows you if you have qualified for an equity adjustment or not. And there's 2 levels. So you can either qualify for a level 1 equity adjustment or a level 2 equity adjustment. And then finally, the next section is attestations. This is again where it includes the allowable expenses and the allowable uses for the funds, so what you can spend this money on. And then there's 3 attestations that are required by the federal government for the department to share in this application. And then it'll have your banking information and the W-9. So this is where you'll select whether you want to be paid by mail or by electronic transfer. And then you go in, you enter your W-9 information. The department heard that in the previous grants that uploading a W-9 was challenging, so they have embedded these questions into the application itself. So you just enter the information there and click submit, and you won't have to upload any additional documents. And then there's a review and summary button. So that's where you'll see your grant award for that month. So we've gotten a couple questions about this, but your total grant amount is divided into 6 monthly payments. And so the review and summary button there will show you your monthly payment for that month. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what these funds can be used for. So the grant funds can be used for one or more of the purposes below. The first being personnel costs, so benefits, premium pay, recruitment and retention. And to dig into this one a little further, this is another example where your feedback will be super important moving forward. So if you feel uncomfortable because this is only it's a limited grant, there's limited funding, it's a limited amount of time. If you feel uncomfortable raising annual salaries based on that money, there's a couple other options. You could provide premium pay for providers, you could provide a stipend. What's important is that we use this money, that we spend the money, and then we show what we were able to do with it, what we weren't able to do with it, how it was helpful, how it wasn't helpful. So that's an example where you could really share some very valuable feedback with the department and with our elected officials to be able to show what we need moving forward and where this was helpful and where it wasn't helpful. You can also use the grant funds for rent or mortgage payments, utilities, facilities maintenance and improvements, or insurance. For personal protective equipment, so PPE, cleaning and sanitation supplies and services, or training and professional development related to health and safety practices. The purchase of or updates to equipment and supplies to respond to COVID-19, goods and services necessary to maintain or resume childcare services, mental health supports for children and employees, and then paying for past expenses incurred after January 31st of 2020. So knowing that many of you had to cover previous expenses to reopen and to operate throughout COVID-19, and that you are allowed to use this funding to pay for some of those past expenses. So what is important here is that the department will be including a midpoint and a post-point grant report. So what you'll need to know is that programs are responsible for maintaining documentation of how you are using these funds. And then with the attestations, you're responsible for maintaining documentation about compliance with the attestations. And we know that there's a lot of questions about what that means for programs, what's necessary. And so we're working to pull together some resources and supplies, sort of activating our networks to get some of those answers for providers. But what's most important to know is that you'll need to maintain documentation for how you're using these funds and what you're spending it on. So now we're going to go into our second poll of the evening before we get into Q&A. And I will turn it over to Amy to get us started with that. But we're wondering, what additional support do you need to complete the application?
Thanks so much, Marissa. And we have everything going all at once. We have the chat box going, we have the Q&A going, we have English, we have Spanish. So keep the questions coming. Sometimes our answer is going to be, you have to go back to the help desk because it's a very specific question. But overall, some of the questions around, can I change information? You should be able to change information. It may take a couple tries to be able to do that, but the state really wants to give the most dollars that people are eligible for. So as we think about, and it's been very helpful to hear what questions people are having now. We'll do this poll, and then Marissa's going to actually show you the application. So this is about what else do you need to be successful. So if folks could take a minute and you can pick all that would be helpful to you. So hearing from providers who have already filled it out, advice on the tax and benefits, support from the help desk, more information on the documentation that EEC will require, and then any other ideas that you have. And you can pick as many as you think you might need help about. So great, we have votes coming in already. And again, if you have questions, you can use the Q&A, or we've set the chat up so that you will email the panelists so that we can make sure that we have the answer. So thanks for filling out the poll.
While we wait, are the dental expenses covered? I have to ask about that question. I didn't think so.
Think so.
But personal health bills of any kind? Probably not, but
Probably not. That
It's
would
not-
be something to
it has
check.
to be something from your program, correct?
Right.
But again, you can ask the help desk for any expense that you think might be eligible but is not clear. Just ask your question to the help desk at EEC.
Okay, we are about almost halfway of folks filled out the poll about what kind of help. And I see we have a question in chat about who will help with filling out the application. And so I think we are trying to figure out the best way to get help for that. So Marisol, if you want to email us, we'll try to connect you with folks who can help with the application. Okay, I'm going to give the poll about 30 more seconds. Okay, so now we can see where people would love some help and support. So the tax and benefit implications, more information about the reporting and documentation is at 71, 68, and then the help desk, and then hearing from providers who have done this successfully. So this is really helpful information. We are planning 2 more sessions. Is it next week, Marissa? That we are going to feature people who have successfully filled out the application and want to share their experiences. So thank you for filling out this poll. I'll turn it back to Marissa.
Thank you. So I'm going to share one last resource with you all before we go into the Q&A section and share the application itself. So the first is that we at Strategies for Children have created an EEC Child Care Stabilization Grant information page on our website. And I've included the link on this slide. On this website, you can find the following information. So we have created 2 guide to the grant documents, one for group and school age programs and one for family child care programs, that give you sort of all the information that's included in this presentation consolidated into a 1-page document that you can look through and have all the information in one place. And this is available in English and in Spanish. And I'll again point you to that link there in the chat, or that link there on the page. That's where you can find those 2 documents. We also have included 2 Google forms for feedback and questions, one in English and one in Spanish, where we are collecting feedback, questions, information about the C3 formula, about the stabilization grants, and sharing this regularly with the Department of Early Education and Care. We also have included all of the EEC links and application resources that we discussed earlier on our website so that you have all the links to those there. And then, as Amy said, upcoming information sessions and panels. So we hosted 2 information sessions today. We had hosted 2 others previously in July. We'll have the recordings for all 4 of those listed on our page where you can go back and watch them again. And then we'll also have 2 provider panels next Monday, August 16th, one for group and school age programs and one for family child care programs, where you can hear lessons learned, where providers had challenges with the application, where they found success, how they are sort of tackling some of these questions related to taxes, related to the reporting requirements. And we'll have that next week. So you can go ahead and register for those there. And then finally, I have our contact information. So a link to sign up for EEC's or for SFC's email updates and advocacy alerts, and then the links to our social media. So our Facebook, our Twitter, and our Instagram. Facebook especially, where we post a lot of updates throughout the week and where we will continue to share information. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and then take a look at the Q&A in the chat and see if there's any questions to answer now. Otherwise, I will pull up the application itself. Yes, so I see within the personnel cost is payment for application for educators themselves is included in that. So if you were to increase the salaries for your educators, or if you were to provide a premium pay or a stipend for working throughout COVID-19, those are sort of 3 examples where you could provide extra pay to the educators or the assistants that work in your programs.
I think it's personnel and not personal. And I think that might be mixed in the translation of just that word. So personnel is cost for your staff. So we can get a better definition for people. And somebody had a great idea about templates, about what allowable uses of the funds. So we will work on that. But I think that might be where some of the question and confusion might be coming from.
Definitely. And like Amy said, if there's any additional thoughts you have or suggestions on what might be helpful, please include it in the chat so that we can collect that information and get it for you. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull up our application just so you all can take a quick look at what that looks like. And I know there was a couple questions we had earlier that I want to just sort of show how that would work in the application itself. That might be easiest. All right, so we have pull that up quickly. All right. Here it is. So I'm using the family child care application as my example right now. Again, please keep in mind that there is slight differences between the family child care and the group and school age, but for our purposes here today, it'll serve as a good example. So let me know if everyone can see that. Amy, does that look good?
It's a little small, but
We can go a little bigger.
there you go. There you go.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to point out, oh, very slow. Let's go a little bigger. All right. First thing I wanted to point out is that at the very top of this application is where you can see where you can select the language of your preference. So the top right-hand corner is where you can choose if you would like to read the rest of the application in English, Spanish, Portuguese, or Mandarin. So that's over here at the top right-hand side. This is on the dashboard. So this is before you go into each application. When you scroll down under the available grants section, in this description section here, there is a small little blue here sign that is highlighted. So that's where programs can click to learn more information about payment schedules. And your payment schedule is determined by when your application was accepted. And then you'll be able to see when you should be expecting payment. And again, please keep in mind that sort of for this initial first month and the initial first weeks of this application, that there may be some delays, but that over the course of the 6 months, that should all sort of even out and become more regular. And so if there were delays, I saw a comment earlier about some delays on when payment was expected, but keep in mind that it should be going out soon and that moving forward, it should be a lot smoother. All right, so now we go into the application itself. The first section is instructions. So here is where you'll be able to see what you'll need to complete the application, how to get started, who's eligible, and then what you'll need. So once you're finished with that, you go ahead and you click next and you move on into the next section, which is program information. So I saw someone ask me a question about how you would file an appeal. I'm going to use the example for licensed capacity here. So on the sort of right-hand side of the screen, you can see license capacity of 8. This information is pre-populated from your lead account. So if you go on to your application and you see that your license capacity number is incorrect, so let's say that this woman actually serves 6 children, what you can do is you can click on the blue here button and you can file an appeal. So you'll be able to click on that and you'll be able to correct and change the information about her license capacity there. You can also file an appeal for eligibility. So I saw a couple questions about when you're open or closed, or if you're eligible for the grant or not. That's a great spot where you can file an appeal. You can also file an appeal for staff information for your equity adjustment if you feel as though that does not accurately reflect your program. And then if you're in the middle of an address change, that was another option for filing an appeal. And then there is also an other category at the bottom, and that's for, I saw a couple other very specific examples where you might want to file an appeal or to ask for additional help, but it doesn't fit into any of those categories nicely. You can include that in the other section on the appeal. So moving down to the next section, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. All right, so program information. So I saw a question earlier where someone was asking, they saw that their rate and that their hours were incorrect on the application, and they were wondering how you change that. So if you see on this provider information page that your rate and your hours are incorrect, so it'll say the hours down here, and then here's the fee schedule. If that information isn't correct for your program, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go up here to the top and it says, if no, please correct on your consumer webpage. So when you click here, it'll bring you to the consumer webpage and you'll be able to update all the information that's included on this page. And once you're finished updating it, you would just go down to the bottom, click that you have reviewed the hours of operations and then that it's accurate, and then you just click save and move on to the next one. So yes, you can update that information within the application itself. And then the last one I'll share is on this page. I'm going to go down to the attestation. Well, I'll show you the equity adjustment first. So For the equity adjustment, this is where it's calculated by either your zip code or your census tract level for SVI, or by the percentage of children receiving subsidy in your program. So they're calculating the percentage of children receiving subsidy February 2020 or at May of 2021. And then you can see for this example, the provider is serving no children or has no children receiving a subsidy in their program. However, you can also qualify based on your social vulnerability index. So they've calculated that at 2 different options. And then at the bottom, you can see that this provider would not be eligible for an equity adjustment. And then if you feel that the decision is not fair, you can again click here and use an appeal. So the last section I'm going to show is the attestation section. So this is where it'll show you that same list of allowable expenses. So what you can use these grant funds for. And remember, it's 1 or more of the purposes below. So you can click all of them. You can click just 1 or 2. But those are the categories that you can use the funding for. And then right here, it gives you a little bit more information that it is the provider's responsibility to maintain records and other documentation to support the use of these funds. So that's where you'll want to keep that documentation. And then at the very bottom, these are the 3 federally required attestations. So when open and providing services, I will implement policies in line with guidance and orders from corresponding state, territorial, tribal, and local authorities related to COVID-19. And then for each employee, that you will maintain pay levels and continue insurance and retirement for the duration of the grant. And that you understand that you may not involuntarily furlough employees from the date of application submission through the duration of the grant period. And then finally, that you will provide relief from co-payments and tuition payments for families enrolled in the child care program to the extent possible. And again, to the extent possible is really the key term there. And prioritize such relief for families struggling to make either type of payments. So for each of these 3 attestations, I would again encourage everyone to sort of seek individual counsel for that, knowing that each program has a very specific circumstance and that they may need to seek additional counsel for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and we can answer some questions in the Q&A.
So we got to all of the questions in the Q&A,
Awesome.
but Blanca, Lisa, and Berenice have their hands raised. So I'm not sure if you have a question or, oh, and we're happy to, however, if you want to just let us know. And then Terry Ann Gilling says, can I still file an appeal for a processed application?
Yes. So one of the examples that we have received for this is if you accidentally applied for August as your first month, but that you were eligible for July as well. If your application has not been approved yet, it's rather easy. You just submit it to the help desk. They can send your application back to you and you can apply for July as your first month. If your application has been approved, it's still possible. It just will take longer and is a slightly more challenging process. So yes, you can still file an appeal when your application has been submitted, but you'll need to get in touch with the EEC for that and use the help desk support to do so.
We also had some questions about, I already got approved. I thought the money was going to be here by now. And we have heard that they just were overwhelmed with over 4,000 programs have already applied. So I think they're working through all of that. As this process continues, it will probably become easier that each month you will log in. If there are any changes, you will make those changes and then hit a button to say everything is the same, or I just updated it, and then the payments will come from EEC that month. It's a little tricky getting everything going.
Yeah, the start's always the most challenging, but hopefully everything will be a little bit easier.
And can you
forward.
use funds to pay real estate taxes if you own your own home? I think I want to confirm with EEC about this. So we will send that in when you get a follow-up email, you will have all of our contact information. So please, if you have a specific question like that you want us to help you with, just shoot us another email, and then we will work to get you answer, especially around the tax questions. We are working every day to try to get better information about that. And whenever we get it, we will share, we'll send email to everyone who registered for all of the webinars. So
Great.
Marissa, last word here at 8:04. First, we have to thank the team, Titus, Reed, Juan. Oh my gosh, I can't see everybody.
Jimena.
Ximena and Marissa for all of the ways we communicated and gathered all the questions. If you still feel like you have a question, again, reach out to us again. And Marissa, over to you for last thoughts.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope this was helpful. And we'll send out the follow-up email with all the resources, the slides, and feel free to take a look at our website and get some more information there. But
And we
good luck.
did
We hope this was
record this.
helpful.
We recorded this in English and Spanish, and we're going to post it to our YouTube channel where you can share that with other people as well. So thank you so much. Buenas noches, and we will see everybody soon. Thank you.